Hello and welcome. I'm Ali Mustafa and this is Straight Talk. After success in Afrin, is Turkey preparing for another military operation? We look at Ankara's options. 15 years since the US invasion of Iraq, we look at how Iran has emerged as one of the region's biggest winners. And Uber's bumpy ride in Turkey. The ride-hailing app faces roadblocks in Istanbul. Turkish-backed forces have captured the strategic Syrian town of Afrin from the YPG terror group. Having held the region for nearly 6 years, the PKK's Syrian offshoot melted away as the Free Syrian Army, backed by Turkish forces, moved into the city centre. Initially, tens of thousands of civilians had fled in anticipation of heavy fighting. Many are now returning. But what's next for Turkey after this significant victory? Omer Kablan tries to explore the possible scenarios in his report.
A major breakthrough for Turkey in securing its southern border. The Free Syrian Army, backed by the Turkish armed forces, took control of Afrin from the PKK-linked YPG. The YPG had vowed to defend the enclave until the end, describing it as an existential fight to preserve their territory. The terror group relocated hundreds of militants from Manbij to defend Afrin, but in the end, there was little resistance.
Teröristlerin çoğu zaten kuyruklarını kıstırıp kaçmışlardır. Kalan kılıç artıklarını ve geride bıraktıkları tuzakları da özel birliklerimiz ve Özgür Suriye ordusu mensupları temizliyorlar. Afrin şehir merkezinde artık terör örgütünün paçavraları değil, huzurun ve güvenin sembolleri dalgalanıyor.
Despite repeated assurances, the US continues to support the YPG. This has pushed Ankara to recalibrate its focus towards halting YPG expansionism.
There is a view to drive YPG and PYD out of Manbij. We are having negotiations with the US.
The US says no deal has been reached on Manbij, but the YPG is only one part of Turkey's concerns. It says Bashar al-Assad is the biggest hurdle to peace in Syria. He was last seen driving in eastern Ghouta, where his army has targeted civilian areas. Since February, his forces have pounded the Damascus suburb, reportedly killing more than 1,000 people in the past few weeks. And they've had support from Russia and Iran. Russia has 2 permanent bases in Syria and has been conducting air attacks in support of the regime.
Мы провели огромную работу по укреплению законной власти и государственности Сирии. Укрепили ее вооруженные силы.
Iran is said to be playing a longer game, helping resettle Iraqi and Lebanese Shia militia in previously Sunni-dominated areas of Syria. 7 years of war have changed the demographics of the country. Different groups have captured and lost different parts of the country. Terrorist groups have taken advantage of the chaos of the war. This is where it all stands right now, but it's very difficult to know what this map might look like 6 months from now. Omer Kablan, Straight Talk.
And to discuss this further, I'm joined in the studio by Uz Chelikol. He's a former ambassador to Syria, and by Baby Bassan, who is a lecturer at Ibn Khaldun University. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So Afrin is out of the way now. It's been cleared of YPG by Turkey. What's next for Turkey?
Well, in Afrin, of course, and before in Jarablus, Elbap and Aziz, Turkey showed its military strength and its will that Turkey will resort to military strength. But now time, I think, comes for a diplomatic solution. We are negotiating with the United States. And at the beginning of March, there were some, as you know, when Tillerson visited Ankara, there were some committees. They met, one of these committees
I want you to get to the American side in a bit, but tell us about, maybe I can bring in Webby here as well. You've got the FSA, which is this 20,000 strong force that is behind Turkey, that has moved in. You've got a corridor emerging now from Jarablus, Azaz, Al-Bab, now Afrin going into Idlib, so a significant amount of territory in the hands of Turkish-backed forces. Before you move to the US, what's the play here, Webby? I want to get Webby's input here.
Well, I think Turkey is going to show it is soft power now. There is going to be an administration, there is going to be security, and I understand that the administration will include Azaz, Jarablus area, now including Afrin, and there will be a joint administration, and all the population in these areas will join in the population, and they are going to secure the area.
How might this help Turkish-backed forces on a negotiating table with Russia, Iran, and the Syrian regime?
Well, I think that's a good question. Now, regime doesn't see the opposition as opposition. For them, it is terrorist groups. This was clear when Bashar al-Assad visited Sochi and met the Russian president, where he said that I'm here to thank you for helping us at our war against terror. So now, this means the opposition was out of table. Now Turkey actually bringing them back on the table. The stronghold was near Idlib province, and now their morale is very high, they're armed, and their success actually contributed significantly in capturing Afrin, which is very important for Turkey. It is a small step for the operation, but very important one, because 3 months earlier, I think the commander of land forces there, he said that we are going to deploy 30,000 armed men along Turkey's Syrian and Iraqi borders. And he never actually explained what does this mean and which country on earth would possibly accept something like that. Another, of course, question is that also here on these screens, several times I mentioned this, United States in the war against, fighting against Daesh or ISIS, actually they brought in over 5,000 truck loads of guns and weapons. Now, and they
Turkey says, through Turkish estimates.
That's what, but also actually, more or less, United States doesn't deny that.
We've seen pictures coming in from Manbij of US forces walking alongside, well, not the YPG, but going into city center of Manbij, meeting individuals, people, mostly, a lot of Arabs in Manbij as well. It was an Arab majority town. Absolutely. What kind of message are these US forces sending?
Well, I think wrong messages. And wrong messages they're sending, in our view, because we have mixed messages coming. Both, actually, the ground forces do understand the regional dynamics and Turkey's national security concerns. But unfortunately, thousands of kilometers away in Washington, it's not that clear for them. They're really pragmatic. If there is a problem, there's certain strategic solutions to it, but unfortunately, it does not always fit the region or reality on the ground.
Let me pull back. You're saying Washington isn't seeing the ground reality. But we saw as soon as Afrin was captured, or the YPG was cleared from Afrin, we saw the FSA move in and start what some would say activities that put Turkish-backed forces, at pause. Let's listen to what Mevlut Çavuşoğlu had to say about what happened in Afrin right after the YPG was removed.
We are very sensitive to looting or inhumane treatment in Afrin. We will certainly not allow these kind of actions. Everybody knows that our security forces are not doing and will never do such a thing. We also don't expect the Free Syrian Army to choose such a way. We know them. Again, we will not allow anybody to loot. But if there is any complaint, we will investigate carefully.
Çavuşoğlu there talking about not condoning any sort of looting. Ibrahim Kalın also came out and said that President Erdogan was very upset about what had happened. How difficult does a situation like this become for Turkey when 20,000 of the people that it has trained go into Afrin, an area which has been largely left untouched despite this 52-day operation? There were no bombing raids in Afrin city center. Turkey said it was being very careful, but then the image that goes out in the world is these, irregular FSA forces go in and start looting. Ambassador.
Well, we are talking about 7 years civil war, which devastated Syria. All the human, effects of this war. So it is not easy to conduct these operations. The pictures taken in Raqqa, the pictures taken in Mosul, shows the difficulty of these operations, American-based operations in Mosul and Raqqa, and in other cities in the area. But Turkey has always been very sensitive to the civilian lives, and that operation will be conducted in a way that civilian population will not be affected. And that shows the sensitivity continues in Turkey.
I'll give you the last word on that.
Yeah, actually, when we say Free Syrian Army, that consists of dozens of different armed groups. They position themselves in different ideological spectrum as well as they come
So is it wise for Turkey to support such a...
Well, no, as actually, one, to bring them to table, this was, I think, necessary. Number two, actually using locals in that who knows the language and concept of the area. But unfortunately, it seems that the Turkish army did not really anticipate how these guys, once they're in the city, would behave. This is our fear. So that's why I think we should be more careful, because even the extreme ideological media agencies, they never blamed Turkish soldiers there. They blamed those who did it, and Turkey was quite actually swift into reacting and stopping this looting and actually paying back to those locals who had some damages. Probably Turkey's swift reaction would be an answer to it.
Ambassador Uz Çelikol and Baby Besan. This past week marked 15 years since the US invaded Iraq, which ultimately toppled Saddam Hussein. But instead of bringing in peace, the past decade and a half has seen sectarian tensions rise, terrorist attacks, and corruption. Many countries who had a stake in Iraq's future also saw their influence wane and fortunes drained. But one power has emerged stronger, as Courtney Keeley explains.
نقطه مهم و شیرین سال گذشته این بود که تهدیدهای منطقه‌ای
In an Iranian New Year's message on state television, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said Iran has diffused all regional threats that threatened the Islamic Republic.
در این سال این تهدیدها رو تبدیل کنه به فرصت.
The Ayatollah didn't dwell on specifics, but did say the threats have turned into opportunities.
و کسانی که آگاه از مسائل بین‌المللی.
With Daesh driven out of its so-called caliphate in Syria and Iraq, the Iranian-backed Assad regime in control of Syria's main cities, and Iranian relationships strengthened in Iraq, Iran has indeed capitalized on the vast instability in the region. Iranian proxy militias take orders from the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's elite Al-Quds force, Major General Qasem Soleimani, in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Nearly two-thirds of the militias who beat back Daesh in Iraq are loyal to Iran. But it's not just military might. Iran is Iraq's top trading partner. The two countries' annual trade volume has hit $12 billion. Saudi Arabia's trade with Iraq stands at half that amount. There are Iraqi political parties and groups like the Badr organization that have ties with Iran stretching back to the 1980s fight against Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War. Outgoing U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said recently that since 2012, Iran has funneled $16 billion to the Assad regime in Syria, as well as to proxy militias in Iraq and Yemen. Iran has nearly completed its Shia crescent of influence, stretching from its capital Tehran to Baghdad to Damascus and to Beirut. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis says the U.S. has evidence Iran is trying to influence the upcoming Iraqi elections. Like it or not, the militias loyal to Iran fought under the umbrella of the Popular Mobilization Forces, which was officially incorporated into Iraq's security forces by Iraqi lawmakers. While the militias are banned from overtly entering Iraqi politics, nearly 30 political parties affiliated with them are registered for general elections in May. Up for re-election, Prime Minister Haidar al-Abadi has struck a more nationalistic tone and has been welcoming to both Iran and the U.S. But regardless of who wins the election and what alliances are formed, one thing is clear: Iran will likely have many friends in the new Iraqi government. Courtney Keeley, Straight Talk.
And to discuss this further, I'm joined in the studio by Murad Aslan. He's a lecturer at Hassan Kalyuncu University, and by Ahmed Rashdi, who's flown in from Iraq and is a foreign policy advisor to the Speaker of the Iraqi Parliament. Thank you so much for being here. As you've made the longer journey, Ahmed, let me begin with you. Iran's influence, specifically in Iraq, how much of an influence is there, or has it been exaggerated?
Well, actually, Iran, from the beginning, from 2003, made some sort of an agreement with the Shiite components of Iraq as some sort of alliance inside Iraq. And at that time, it started to begin to progress its relation with the rest in a way or another, to have a good relation with the Kurds and also try to convince the Sunnis that they are not an enemy for them. But at the end, the problem happened in 2014. Or let's say before 2014, when Mr. Maliki actually marginalized the Sunni from its cabinet and also from the political life, which also showed that Iran is actually backing Mr. Maliki at that time. And we all know what's happened in 2014 when Daesh came and invaded the whole Sunni territory in a way or another. And people, as a reflect of the bad relationship between Maliki and the Sunnis, actually accepted in a way or another someone other than the Iraqi government. Now, what's happened in 2014 is that step down of Mr. Maliki, who took about 700,000 votes, with Mr. al-Badi, who took only 3,000 votes. It showed you that how much the Iranian influence actually failed to convince Iraq as Maliki is again become a prime minister, which also show you now is that how much the Iranian influence actually afraid what's going to happen in the next days.
In a zero-sum game, if we are to believe Ahmed Rashdi, if Iran's influence with the rise of Abadi is a sign that Iran's influence is waning to an extent. We'll talk about that as well. What about the US influence? Is it on the rise? Murad?
Actually, the main policy of the United States is to cut the Iranian influence, especially towards Israelis, which means they are afraid of, a build-up of Shiite crescent, especially at the south of Iraq and Syria, that can easily reach to Lebanon. And we can see from the employment of the PKK by the United States that they want to try to cut up that linkage, especially in Syria, because we know that Deir ez-Zor is just at the up north of this crescent, and they support PKK just to locate themselves in the midst of Shia groups.
You're talking about Shia groups. I quickly want to bring in Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's made this quite a public tour to the United States. And he said specifically, speaking about the Iranian Supreme Leader, Khamenei, he said that he wants to create his own project in the Middle East, very much like Hitler. Is that a fair comparison, Murad?
Well, the comparison is not that much better, because Hitler is different and Iran is different. Doesn't matter who the leader is.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, why would MBS make such a statement quickly?
Yeah. What I believe is that most states in the Middle East, especially the one who are totalitarian, are afraid of Iranian influence upon the Shia public in their communities. Because if you go through the Gulf Council, for instance, and as you know, it was built in 1981, just against the Iranian threat against themselves. They do not want any, interference of Iran in the community. Because if you go through the Iranian constitution, the articles 151st, 52nd, and 53rd, these articles indicate a regional policy that Iran will address the needs of the Muslims in the regions, especially the Shiites. But actually the practice is not such like that, because we see close linkage of Iran with the Kurds at the north of Iraq, and they are not Shiite.
Well, there was some talk of Turkey and Iran getting into an agreement to take care of that issue, especially around Kandil. We'll get to that in a bit, but we've got Saudi Arabia, we've talked about that. The incoming new national security advisor in the US, John Bolton, wrote an article some time ago titled, "To Stop Iran's Bomb Iran." What do you make of that?
Well, it shows you that Trump is actually collecting his allies inside the administration in a way to raise up a flag, which is maybe the war flag in a way or another against Iran, which also puts some sort of afraid in the Iranian government in a way or another.
But realistically, do you honestly think the Americans can bomb Iran in this day and age? At this anniversary of 15 years later when they bombed Iraq, and we've seen how that experiment turned out, what do you see?
But it's supposed to be you are expecting anything as the Iranian government, as any government. It's supposed to be expecting anything that happens, especially from personality like Trump, who is he's actually doing always the non-expected. So with the Pompeo, with Bolton, with MBS visit to US to try to make some sort of interest of what's happening inside the administration, to make some sort of Israeli talks about bombing Iran and so on, it looks like there is some clouds in the sky talking about something solid against Iran, which also going to reflect the Iraqi election, by the way.
It's a domino effect. Ominous tidings from Baghdad. But thank you so much, Ahmed Rashdi, for joining us here. And Murad Aslan, always a pleasure. The tense rivalry between drivers of traditional yellow cabs and Uber has turned violent in the Turkish city of Istanbul. Uber drivers claim they have been attacked, beaten, and even shot at by angry taxi drivers in the city. As for taxi drivers in Istanbul, they are seeking a ban on the ride-hailing app. Straight Talk's Adil Halim picks up the story.
Taxi drivers want Uber banned from Turkey, and they're taking the international ride-sharing service to court. These taxi drivers say Uber is operating illegally in Turkey, stealing passengers and hurting their bottom line. The taxi industry also claims millions are being lost in possible tax revenue.
If they push our limits, we'll fight for our bread.
Fighting words in this all-out war. Hashtags are trending. Shots fired online. And real shots fired. An Uber vehicle came under fire recently in Istanbul's Küçükçekmece district. The driver escaped unharmed, but others haven't been so lucky. Several drivers have reported they were beaten up on the job. These Uber drivers are on edge.
I don't want any fights. I don't want brute force. We are not bullies. The aim of this job is to serve people with a smiling face. Our aim is to stop this monopoly ruling for a long time.
I can say 99% of the people get in my car, okay, the first word they tell me straight away, thank God Uber is in Turkey.
Orhan Nergis has been with the company for 2 months and already has a story of his own.
So he tried to punch me. The window was open, so I pulled my head back and I drive. I tried to get out of the square, and one of the other taxi driver kicked my car, and it damaged my car.
Last September, Uber lost its license to operate in London. And local taxi drivers want the same result. For its part, the company says it's filling a void in Turkey, where taxi drivers have long been accused of taking foreigners for a ride, quite literally.
They won't drive us short distances. They don't take us if it rains or if it's cold. They ask where we want to go. If I say 1 kilometer, they won't take me.
Taxi drivers don't respect us. Last time I took the taxi, he wanted a cigarette from me. He said, "Sister, you can smoke in the car. If you have, can you give me one too?" Imagine.
More and more passengers are reaching for their smartphones instead of flagging down a taxi on the street. Yellow cabs have also introduced their own Uber-like smartphone apps like iTaxi and bTaxi.
Everywhere you look in this city, you're bound to see a sea of yellow. There are 18,000 licensed taxis in Istanbul, but drivers say there's been a significant drop in pickups.
How can we not be angry? I pay 8,000 liras to rent this taxi, while Uber drivers pay nothing. What they do is theft.
The trial has been adjourned until June, when the court will determine if an all-out Uber ban is necessary. Until then, Uber drivers say they'll be sure to keep looking over their shoulder. Adil Halim, Straight Talk, Istanbul.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ali Mustafa. If you've got any comments or suggestions, do share them with us at #StraightTalk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.